You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. With my contribution for the debate on the budget, Honorable Speaker, I'd like to take it from as a Christian. I wish to base my contribution in a Bible verse that has always challenged me. This is the book of James, chapter 2, verses 15-16, and I quote, "Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food, and someone says to him, 'Go, I wish you well, keep warm and well fed,' but does nothing about his physical needs, what good is it?" Unquote. We can all relate to this, Honorable Speaker. As individuals, many of us will give the shirt off our back to clothe someone or give food to the hungry. The challenge is more pronounced for us politicians and parliamentarians, as our calling is on a national scale, and we are charged to look after our people, or as we say in SODELPA, the Leoni Bonua, as some may put it, we don't leave anyone behind. We know of a woman who could no longer afford dialysis, and when she went for the last time, there were tears from the staff members at the facility who knew she would not last. And indeed, she was gone shortly after. We know of a young lady, educated through TELS, who can find employment and unable to pay TELS and is now selling her body. My grandchildren have a friend in primary school who is from a family of 16 living in one room. What can we do as leaders to ensure no one goes home to die because she could no longer afford dialysis, or that a young woman resorts to selling her body, or that housing is so bad families live in congested homes? As the Bible admonishes us, we cannot say, "Go, I wish you well." Honorable Speaker, it all comes down to funding. And we cannot continue to say that we don't have the funds. We can raise the funds if we are smart with our taxation, or rather, if we strictly align the funding of government to the needs of our people. We're already doing that in some ways, but not in a manner that places our people as paramount. Put very simply, Honorable Speaker, our taxation is giving too much away to businesses and shortchanging the Leoni Bonua. In short, there is too much favoritism. Let me highlight some examples, including the changes being proposed for the Income Tax Act and indirect tax measures. Number one, concessionary rates of tax for regional or global headquarters. This facility, Honorable Speaker, was set up in 2013 to entice foreign companies to move their headquarters to Fiji. Only one company has done that, the ANZ Bank. Corporate tax was reduced to 17%, and a 150% tax deduction on capital items acquired for the relocation. The proposed change is to increase corporate tax to 20%, but says nothing of the 150% tax deduction. Honorable Speaker, corporate tax was 28% in 2011, but reduced in 2012 to 20%. For resident and non-resident companies, 17% for those moving the headquarters to Fiji, and 10% for those listed in the South Pacific Stock Exchange. Honorable Speaker, SODELPA proposes to take corporate tax back to 28% for resident companies and 33% for non-resident companies. Comparing our rates, Honorable Speaker, in Papua New Guinea, the corporate tax is 30%. In Samoa, it's 27%. In Sri Lanka, 24%. Tonga, 25%. Jamaica, 25%. Australia, 30%. New Zealand, 28%. The non-resident average corporate rate for the 5 developing countries is 31.6%. In 2013, Honorable Speaker, tax collection on corporate tax with PAYE was $403,823,500 $1,900. By 2018-2019, it was down to $121 million, $771,500. We don't have the breakdown between the corporate tax and PAYE, but certainly an increase to corporate tax will increase the tax collected. Number 2, Honorable Speaker, is on corporate tax rates for the South Pacific Stock Exchange listed companies. This was introduced in 2014 to reduce tax to 10% to incentivize more companies to list, but only 4 companies took the initiative between 2014 and 2021. To create a level playing field, Honorable Speaker, SODELPA will increase corporate tax to 28% for all listed companies. SODELPA raised the question whether capital gains tax exemptions and income tax exemptions will still apply for shareholders who trade in the SPSC. They trade for gain and engage in schemes or arrangements to derive huge profits from the disposal of their shares. They are sources of revenue, so SODELPA will realize for the revenue more. Number 3, Honorable Speaker, is the electric vehicle charging station development package. This income tax concession, Honorable Speaker, was introduced in 2016 with a minimum investment of $3 million. This was reduced to $500,000 in 2017-2018, reduced to $100,000 in 2018-2019, and now reduced to $50,000. So SODELPA asked the question, are there no takers? This income tax concession can be open to abuse, Honorable Speaker, especially by those companies with more than one income streams. They can load this concession into one of their businesses of income stream and not pay tax. So SODELPA will not allow this to happen, and will keep the minimum investments at a higher level. Number 4, Mr. Speaker, is the non-resident withholding tax refunds. Honorable Speaker, when you see this, it's an indication that Fiji was not upholding the double tax agreement, DTA, in accordance with Section 1409 of the Income Tax Act 2015. What happens, Honorable Speaker, if you flood the DTA after December 2022? So SODELPA notes that Fiji is not upholding the DTA when it comes to dividend distribution. The DTA provides Fiji the taxing rights to tax dividends paid to non-resident shareholders, even though we have excluded the taxing right of dividend from our domestic law. Honorable Speaker, the DTA overrides domestic law, and Fiji is letting go of revenue it should collect. So SODELPA will rectify this. Number 5, Honorable Speaker, is special capital gains tax on sales of shares. So SODELPA questions the difference between the resident person and a Fiji citizen. There's now a Fiji citizen, Honorable Speaker, is now part of this act. But in the Income Tax Act, it defines a person as an individual, company partnership, trust, government, political subdivision, or a government or international organization. Fiji citizen, Honorable Speaker, is not defined in the Income Tax Act. A Fiji passport holder is treated as a Fiji citizen, and if residing overseas and paying tax overseas, that citizen is also eligible for capital gains exemption, and upon disposal of their shares, they will remit and declare the proceeds of the tax jurisdiction to the tax jurisdiction overseas. And Fiji loses out from tax revenue it direly needs. There are a number of scenarios, Honorable Speaker, that can be developed, and SODELPA will make sense of all this. SODELPA will ensure that we stay only with Fiji residents in the Act and do away with the provision on Fiji citizen. It's very confusing, Honorable Speaker, and it can be subject to abuse. A question that comes up is how we treat shares and what type of assets are they in the Income Tax Act 2015. Also, will income tax apply for the sale of shares acquired prior to May 2011? Capital gains in general, the rate today when disposing capital assets is 10%. This encourages lots of tax planning, whether the capital gains tax of 10% or the income tax of 20% apply. Tax planning, Honorable Speaker, is that process that ensures all elements work together to allow you to pay the lowest tax possible. So SODELPA will increase the capital gains tax to 28%, similar to corporate tax, to avoid tax planning. Number 6, Honorable Speaker, is VAT extension on disposal of residential dwellings. In 2010, the VAT Act was amended that if you were to earn residential rent above 100,000, then you would be able to register for VAT, i.e. to claim VAT on all your construction works and charge VAT on your rental. In 2020, this was repealed, and Section 23(9) was introduced, allowing those with residential flats to deregister from VAT. Honorable Speaker, VAT works on a credit offset mechanism. If you claim VAT on the expenses on purchase of goods, you will declare VAT on sales of those goods. Section 23(9) had allowed those claiming VAT on their purchases not to declare sales on deregistration from VAT. We are allowing those selling the properties, even though they had claimed VAT on purchases, not to declare sales when selling the properties. Those that built between 2010 and 2020 and claimed VAT returns, a question mark. One can only imagine the loss in government revenue in that VAT refunds claimed as construction expenses, and government will not collect on deregistration or selling of properties. So SODELPA would repeal 23(9) and ensure the credit offset mechanism is maintained to protect revenue. Number 7, VAT rate. There are 3 VAT rates, Honorable Speaker. 0 for basic items and all export of goods, 15 for normal supplies of goods and services, and 9% for other goods and services. These 3 rates, Honorable Speaker, bring about inconsistencies and difficulty in application in both taxpayers and FRCs alike. So SODELPA will have a single rate for VAT at 10% for normal suppliers of goods and services, and 0 for export and basic items stipulated in the 2nd schedule of the VAT Act. These foster tax compliance, ease of facilitation by businesses, easier policing by FRCS, and hence increase in revenue. Number 8, dividend withholding tax. Dividend withholding tax used to apply at 9% to non-residents and at 3% to residents. All these were repealed in 2017, and there are no longer any dividend withholding tax in Fiji. In 2014-2015, government collected $71 million, $720,000 in dividend tax. In 2016-2017, it came to $120 million and 38,000 tax. So SODELPA will bring back dividend withholding tax for non-residents or residents of Fiji. When Fijians are crying out for help, we cannot be foregoing this revenue to please certain people. Branch profits tax, introduced in 2008 and known as branch profit remittance additional normal tax, the rate was 15% on branch profits remitted to overseas head office, and we used to collect some $70 and $80 million annually through this tax. This was repealed in 2015, which was strange as we were taxing income derived in Fiji. So SODELPA will bring back the BPRAN tax, and it will only be fair as we also intend to bring back non-resident withholding tax. Number 10, stamp duty. The stamp duty, Honorable Speaker, was one of the oldest acts in Fiji. That goes back to the 1930s. It was repealed in 2020. In 2018-29, it fetched the government $85 million, $170,000. In 2019, it brought in $66 million, $333,000. So SODELPA will reintroduce the Stamp Duty Act. We cannot be deaf to the cry of our Lebanese, claiming there is no money when we abolish sources of revenue, such as stamp duty. I'm just wondering, Honorable Speaker, when this proposal came up from the leadership in Fiji First, didn't the people say, look, we're going to be losing $80 million, don't do it. We're going to be losing $120 million, don't do it. I'm just amazed that no one spoke up when this kind of revenue was being lost in Fiji because of an ill-thought tax proposal. You need to speak up. They need to speak up, Honorable Speaker. I cannot believe this. I cannot believe this. And Honorable Speaker, there are some tax policies that need to be gazetted. The Non-Resident International Shipping Income Act was legislated in 2016, yet today is still on the shelf, yet to be activated. 6 years, we are not realizing income on this taxation that was legislated. There is the presumptive income tax legislated in 2016, also sitting on the shelf, not being activated. We are losing revenue because we're not activating this. The mining entities, Part 6 of the Income Tax Act 2015 is specifically for mining operations. Implementation of Part 6 can create revenue as it cuts out leakages in the tax revenue, but it needs to be activated. Sitting on the shelf, legislated. Hello, Fiji First, are you awake here? Or why are we not activating these sources of revenue, Honorable Speaker? And Honorable Speaker, there are tax revenues to be legislated. The VAT rewrite. Professor Lee Burns is reviewing this act, which is currently in its 7th draft. He's an Australian and has identified best practices across countries, which would minimize VAT refunds and increase VAT revenue. Two areas that show potential, Honorable Speaker, are the supply of remote services through an electronic marketplace in the likes of Netflix, Alibaba, Amazon, and etc. Imagine that we can tax these people for the content we view in this country. And this is happening globally, and we need to work on it, move on it quickly. Please don't put it on the shelf, Fiji First. Don't put it on the shelf. And creditable acquisitions, we stipulate that tax credit can only apply if what is acquired is consistent with the taxable activity of the person. Both have potential for government revenue, and SODELPA will have them legislated. On zero rating, Honorable Speaker, the VAT rewrite has also revised, and this allowed a lot of services related to the export of goods. This will minimize VAT refunds and increase revenue. Honorable Speaker, there are some tax policies that need to be abolished. One is debt forgiven. Multinational and business tycoons who lend money to their business over here and claim tax on it. They used to pay tax on it, but it was repealed in 2020, and again, it is money down the drain for the people of Fiji. And Honorable Speaker, the other one is the VAT refund for film producing production companies. Section 70C was implemented in the Act in 2016, entitling film production companies to claim refunds on its qualifying expenditure under income tax regulation. It will not declare income, but will be entitled to claim VAT on all expenses borne in Fiji. Consequently, film production companies have received huge refunds. SODELPA believes that income tax rebates offered to these film-making companies is sufficient, and Section 70C should be removed from the VAT Act. And there are some tax policies to be reviewed, Honorable Speaker. One is the ring fencing on salary income. This provision was part of the SODELPA, of the COVID recovery, where someone paying PAYE could take in his losses from other business to reduce his tax. I think COVID is gone. We should go back to this and ring fence the salaries. And the domestic mission fund VAT refund. This, Honorable Speaker, I know in this House we've had people who serve in the diplomatic corps overseas, but in Fiji, people in the mission, in diplomatic missions, international organization, whatever they buy here is VAT refundable. Whatever they buy, personal or for the organization. We must be the only country that is doing this, Honorable Speaker, because our people overseas don't benefit from this. And of course, we'll also look at the tax refund scheme for tourists, because we believe that Fiji is attractive enough, we don't need this incentive in shopping. And we'll also review the tax incentives and tax holidays, Honorable Speaker, to see whether they really are helping the economy. And lastly, Honorable Speaker, SODELPA will introduce a resource tax for the Itoke. SODELPA will introduce a new tax regime to benefit the Itoke, to include upgrading the villages and settlement in the urban areas. It will be collected from industries that affect the environment and the resources of the Itoke. These industries are logging, fishing, petroleum, mining, water industry, tourism, airline, Water Authority of Fiji, Energy Fiji Limited, and others we may identify going forward. Honorable Speaker, on STT, the rate was 6% on gross earnings. On equal, the rate was 10% on gross earnings. Both have been repealed. The resource tax by SODELPA will be on 5% of the gross earnings of the industries named above. Honorable Speaker, in conclusion, SODELPA hears the cry of the people, the Lebanese Benua, and they are desperate for too long, and you have been saying there is no money.
What do you mean?
This is not true. There's money. If we have the will to collect what is due to government to deliver for the people. SODELPA has the will to collect the revenue, required revenue, as allowed by law, and meet the cry of the Lebanese Benua. Government is not committed to making these collections, and many will be left behind. And this budget in many ways falls short, and I therefore do not support this budget. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.